Let's go to CBS 2's Dorothy Tucker. I believe, Dorothy, you're talking to or you have on the phone a protester?
I do. This is a local protester. We're going to choose not to identify him by name because he is kind enough to speak with us and weigh in on this. But this is someone who is very familiar with many of the protests that we've had in the past and was indeed at Federal Plaza today. So, first of all, I'm going to call him a local protester. You've heard Jamaat. We were on the conference call here, and you've heard just a description of what is going on now in downtown Chicago. What's your reaction to it? What do you think about a peaceful protest that, quite honestly, has turned violent, has turned into some of the destruction that we see?
Well, I reject the framing. One, I believe violence to be a force against life, human life, and so the language around destruction and vandalism and looting, when we're only talking about buildings and property, is a further continuation of the systematic issue that has people so outraged. So I would name that policing is a system that is here to protect profit and protect property, and that has been at the destruction of black life for centuries, and it continues on a daily basis. So almost as a journalistic responsibility to be talking about Macy's and State Street and not be talking about the dozens and dozens of unsolved police murders of the Chicago Police Department, I think is problematic. And so my focus is on people, and even the claim of a protest having to be peaceful is, I think, again, a further issue of depoliticizing people's rightful anger and rightful rage. And as you see all over the world and all over the country, oppressed people, marginalized people are rising up. And the fact that centers of capital and centers that are connected to white supremacy are being targeted, particularly policing and the intersection of business, should be respected. And folks should do a little bit more homework of the demands of what folks are demanding, because it's not just about George Floyd. It's about essentially rearranging our society. To call protesters violence when policing and violence is how our society is organized is hypocritical and contradictory. And so you should read the signs and listen to what people are saying. They are saying that we need to divest from police systems, and we know that our state formations and those with political power do not move unless institutional capital and unless profit centers are affected. And so the fact that this is not an organized effort and folks are organically, from a place of anger, taking similar political action around the country and making similar demands with the same anger that police are oppressive and a violent force in our society, should be taken with a little bit more serious. And so I understand people may be afraid and triggered and scared, and that is rightfully so. But folks should also be naming the violence that the police are doing today. I myself was almost ran over just for drumming on a sidewalk. Folks have been tear gassed. Folks have been beaten. And the police have been doing this every year that you can count. It is documented. Y'all have all of the footage and all the reels and all the clippings of all the stories that you've covered every few months. And so I would just encourage folks to be a little bit more politically mature and understand that this is not happening in a vacuum, and be very, very careful with your language right now. Okay,
I will accept that education. Let me ask you a question. What is it that protesters want to see as a result of this? And I know you and I talked earlier, and this is not just about George Floyd. This is about Ahmaud Arbery. This is about Laquan McDonald and Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland. This is about all of them. But what is it that protesters want to see when you have not just a message that is out about those who have been murdered, those who have been wronged, but you also see I'm not quite sure what word to use. I won't call it violence anymore, but we also still see just the
damage of property.
The damage of property. Okay, that's a good word. But what do you want to see? What as a result of all this?
Well, I think many folks across the nation are demanding a divestment from policing and a rearrangement of our institutional structures. So police have been hired and paid to manage the collective behavior of communities that have been traumatized and systematically divested from, and then criminalized as a result of that divestment. So as we are in a pandemic right now, I believe if the 40% of the Chicago budget, which comes out to about $4 million a day, that's invested in the Chicago Police Department, was invested in public health, we would be prepared for a pandemic. If we did not spend $40 million extra dollars to make sure that police were in our schools could have the resources they need so that they could have libraries and nurses, so that people don't become sick, so that people don't suffer from mental health crisis, so that violence and conflict is not perpetuated in traumatized communities. So we know the resources communities need to be healthy. We know it is not the police that keep Naperville and Schaumburg safe. It is equitable access to resources. And so we want our nation and our cities to stop investing so much resources into militarized force that we know is oppressing us, and we have so much evidence of the violence that is killing our people.
Let me ask one last question. Are we going to see this again tomorrow? Do you think that there are going to be more protests, or is this it?
I don't know, and I can't confirm what folks' plans are, but I know we are in a time of uprising, so I do not expect political activity to stop anytime soon.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me.
I have a question for the gentleman, if you would allow me to ask a question. Sir, can you do two things at once? Can you criticize police misconduct? Can you speak up and protest to support victims of police misconduct, and at the same time to say that what we've seen tonight in the destruction of not just property, but in some cases the livelihood of average rank and file people to make a living, to put food on the table, to pay their rent. A lot of the places that have been destroyed tonight hired people, average people, not high-income people. Can you do two things at once?
I would say you would not ask that question of anyone else. I would say you would not ask questions about those people on other days. So I do have a problem with the framing, but of course I respect the life of all human beings. And it is hypocritical to be in defense of police violence, trying to name that there is violence and destruction happening. If you were really concerned with violence journalistically, I believe that there would be deeper questions being asked about the structural nature of what's happened.
Let me ask a question about just who's doing this. You were down there earlier, but you left. So who's left? Who's downtown now? Are the same people, or many of the same people who we see at 11:20 tonight? Were they there at 2 o'clock? Are we talking two different crowds here? Just because you're not there.
I'm not there, so I can't speak to where I am not. But I know people from all over the city and all over communities are standing up together. Folks drove around not only downtown, but all of the locked facilities in solidarity with young people locked right now in juvenile detention centers, as well as Cook County jails that have rising rates of COVID infections, and folks are being kept before being convicted. And so, that's why I respond to the question of if there really was a concern for human life, the anger would be taken with a little bit more seriousness. And I myself, am not destroying anything right now, but I would challenge myself to ask why this is happening, and understanding that this institution comes from slavery, and so we should be looking at this in terms of a larger historical structure.
Dorothy, we're having a hard time hearing you right now. Thank you so much. And